Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, recording on a Saturday. So if you're looking at the YouTube version, I'm not wearing my suit and tie. This could be shocking for some people. And today I have with me Darren Bloomfield. Darren, thank you for joining me today. How's it going?
Good. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. My pleasure. So Darren is a recent RMI grad. And I worked with him a little bit during his job search at the end of the program. And I've always thought that I'm not an RMI major myself. So I've always thought that when RMI majors graduate, it gets really interesting because on a normal year, not in 2020, but on a normal year, it feels to me like the NFL draft. They get multiple offers, and then they proudly announce on LinkedIn which offer they accepted. So it's a really different situation from any other job search within insurance that I'm familiar with and that I've ever been involved in myself. Once he did accept the job, which he hasn't started, I told Aaron that we should record an episode on on what he learned. Also, Darren, you ran a podcast for the National Alliance for a while, and we have a very exciting announcement at the end of the podcast today. So if you're not an RMI major and this is not a topic of interest, just skip to like the last 5 minutes to listen to the announcement. So Darren, the microphone's basically yours, and I will
Awesome.
ask questions and you do my usual thing.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Yeah, so as you know, the Risk and Reward podcast, I actually just recorded my last episode yesterday. So that was quite exciting. Good experience with that. And, as you're saying, just kind of the talent pool from the risk management and insurance major. I think it's kind of unique in a way where there's, like 80 something programs, but then there's obviously a lot more jobs that need to be filled outside of that.
For reference, 80 something programs, and by the way, I've been saying 70 something, but I'm assuming your number is more updated than mine since you were just there, right? But 80 something programs, for reference, there are 4,000 schools and universities in the US. And if I had to guess, I really should look up this number, but if I had to guess, probably half of them have business schools. So there's probably 2,000 universities have business schools. Out of those, only 80 have risk management programs. Like, we are way behind. So of course, you kids graduate, and kids is anybody younger than me, which is almost 39. You guys graduate, or you kids graduate, and you only feed between 10 and 15% of our hiring needs. So needless to say, it's like piranhas, right? Like we're competing over the RMI kids. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a great perspective. And kind of back up, why do you choose a risk management and insurance major? Coming to Butler, I knew they had the program. And the way it was pitched to me with what you just kind of said was, your competition in, you go to get a finance degree, you get an accounting degree, like that's a lot of competition. It's a big competition pool. And even with that, we have finance and accounting majors, marketing majors ending up coming to the insurance industry anyway. As people have seen, financial crash and people falling in, to the insurance industry. So I kind of thought, and with the help of some good mentors like Zach Finn, professor at the time, just kind of the way like just kind of that vision and the way to kind of pitch the program and pitch the opportunity, it was really, really unique. And I kind of saw that. And then with, getting some hands-on experience earlier before taking the schoolwork with like Gamma Iota Sigma, WSIA, RIMS, just kind of seeing what, the job actually was, I think that's a really unique opportunity. And that really helps kind of fill like that void between, freshman year to versus like to junior year. We're actually getting into the coursework.
Okay. And everything they told you, they were absolutely correct. And by the way, you bring up a couple of really interesting things. So nobody, in my opinion, in my experience, nobody shows up at a school specifically looking to major in RMI. And by the way, out of the 80 programs, many of them are not majors. They're concentrations in the finance program or whatever. So nobody shows up wanting to major in RMI. And I've asked hundreds of RMI majors who have called me for career advice how they ended up in RMI. And I don't remember if I had asked you in the past, but what I've seen is that there's two ways that people end up majoring in RMI, right? And both start with that person already goes to a school that has an RMI program. Mm-hmm. And the two ways are at Temple or at St. John's. They were a business major, and they were forced to take RMI 101, and they fell in love with it, and they end up majoring in RMI. I'm assuming that Butler doesn't require RMI 101 for every business major, right? Okay.
Yeah, we haven't got to that point yet.
I know the other 78 programs. Mm-hmm. The only two that I'm aware of are St. John's and Temple, and that's very likely why they're the biggest in number of students. Okay, so the other way that I have found people fall into RMI is they're going to an RMI school like Butler, and Gamma has free pizza and a great speaker, and the kids show up for the free pizza, and the great speaker convinces them to give RMI a try. Am I halfway accurate on that?
Right? I mean, yeah, that's kind of the approach that we've taken with our Beta Lambda chapter on campus. But then, I think that's exactly, it's just kind of getting, exposure, getting as much touch points to the insurance industry as possible, bringing those resources and industry professionals to campus, and kind of having a place to kind of showcase that. So that's something I've been doing this semester, is bringing some companies to school in our business school. So then all the majors, all our business majors get exposure to them versus just the risk management majors that would be coming to Gamma meetings.
That's a great idea. I think that Gamma presidents, please invite every other business student. Right, like I pretty much guarantee that whoever's coming to speak is likely happy to sponsor more pizza. Invite all the business students. Partner with any other business clubs, the MBA club or whatever else there is, to get them to listen to the speakers.
And I'd say like
that's how we get people into RMI.
Yeah, like at Butler we have a real estate club. So if you bring in a speaker that specializes in the real estate industry from the insurance perspective, if you bring in a speaker who specializes in financial institutions, and then bring in just like a finance club. So if you bring in, you have to give other majors a reason to be interested.
Makes sense.
They just wouldn't know, unless you make that connection for them. It's kind of hard to kind of see the insurance industry for, the industry that you're in, and see like how the insurance industry impacts what you're already interested in.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. And this next question doesn't apply much at all to the rest of the RMI universe beyond Butler, but were you involved in Professor Sachs' what is it called, student run captive?
Yeah.
And how was that experience?
Yeah, so it was really unique. So I took that junior year, second semester. So that was last year for me. It was a really interesting time, because we were trying to move our captive is domiciled in Bermuda. We're still trying to move it to kind of the States to kind of like more of a local kind of presence. And as we're doing like captive feasibility studies of where we could domicile it, Virginia, Vermont, Tennessee, we're trying to do some studies and kind of looking for like new brokers to kind of work with that. Captives weren't my biggest interest, more focused on the professional liability side, but definitely was interesting. We were trying to see how we could expand our captive and cover more lines of coverage. We're looking at some medical.
So for now, what does the captive cover for anybody who hasn't heard Professor Zach passionately talking about it?
So mostly the the live mascots, we have, well, it was Blue and now it's Trip and Blue. And we have, so that's the Butler dog, Bulldogs. So we have the mascot for them. We have a bomb sniffing dog. So we covered that for the police department. We cover the telescope on campus, the big Butler telescope. And then we have the art, all like the expensive artwork. And then what's really interesting and unique is the real business experience. So sophomore year at Butler, we have students get loans from the school to start up their own student-run business. So when we come in and we would underwrite the exposures for that. Like for example, my sophomore year, my team did we did cookie cutters. So when we 3D printed cookie cutters, we had a paw print, the state of Indiana, and a bulldog. So then when the captive class would come in and underwrite us, they would just ask us like, hey, is this food safe material? And just kind of checking to see like where the exposures are. So I think that is also kind of a hands-on opportunity.
No
as well.
kidding. No, but like you mentioned at the beginning, captives are not what you're going to focus on in your career, you don't think, and that's the reality, right? The 95% of insurance, but probably 98% of insurance professionals don't work with captives. It's a very, very niche area. But that experience, oh my gosh, a hiring manager, like kids that have already underwritten something is just amazing. So that's really awesome. But that only applies to Butler. So for the general RMI kids in the other 79 schools that don't have an in-house captive, how was the process of applying and career fair and interviewing and ultimately choosing a job?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a couple things going on. A little unique for me being a December grad, trying to find like that timeline, a little off recruiting cycle. So I think that was interesting. And that's another thing, like nobody really tells you when to start looking for jobs, just kind of,
interesting.
Like, yeah, I think it just kind of like, maybe you get some messages on LinkedIn or some emails, but it's not really like, it's time, it's just kind of.
Real quick, any listener who is at a carrier and is anywhere near the underwriting trainee program, this is something that I hear all the time. December grads always have a harder time. I mean, they're still in high demand, but it looks like the underwriting trainee programs almost always start in the fall. They assume that you're graduating in May. So if you run one of those programs, they're supposed to be 6 months long. I would run 2 a year, and I would run a smaller one in the spring, and you're going to have you're going to have your pick of December grads, because there's less programs, if any, that take people in January, right? And nobody wants to wait 6 months to start their career, right? Drive Uber or whatever during that time. So anyway, a great competitive advantage for anybody that has 2 classes. So anyway, continue.
And what's kind of interesting too is what you're saying of kind of when the start dates, kind of like that training, kind of like I completely understand the point of having like those cohorts to kind of bounce ideas off each other and kind of move through the company together. I think that's great. And then with that, obviously the elephant in the room is COVID. So what kind of happened with that? Some people's start dates did get pushed back. So then you have this group got pushed back. So everything's pushed back. And then I think that was kind of going on too.
May 2020 grads. It was crazy. The people had offers pulled because companies didn't know how to do it, right? They weren't ready for it. Like, I feel really bad for those kids. I've talked to several of them. I think at this point they've all landed somewhere, but yeah, that class really, like, you're very lucky to be 18 months later.
Yeah. So, another interesting thing is I think kind of like taking the time, the sophomore year, junior year, to kind of build that network, have those internships. So then when it comes senior year, you're not like, you kind of have some flexibility of, what's out there, kind of have an understanding about what line of business you like, what you've seen. Do you want to go wholesale? Do you like E&S? Do you want to be on a carrier? Do you want to be a retailer agent? How close or far to the insured do you want to be? So I think kind of getting that experience, earlier, maybe sophomore year, summer, junior year. I just think having like those internships could not be more valuable. And
Oh my.
I think that's the really huge benefit of the risk management insurance major is to get those internships early into the insurance industry.
So just before we start recording, you mentioned that you feel that one of the biggest benefits of the RMI major is the connections you make and the internships you take. So if and I didn't prepare you for this question, but if you had to give it weight, so if out of 100, so we want them to total 100, right? If you have to divide 100 points between what you learn in the classes, the connections you make, and the internships, how valuable are each of those three things in an RMI program in your very subjective opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're kind of asking is balancing, knowledge versus experience. And then I think, just with the knowledge base kind of in the classroom, personally for me, as soon as I had, that first internship sophomore year, I think I kind of changed things a little for me because I kind of got drew more towards the professional liability side. So I think if the coursework I personally thought kind of covered more of that property casualty, some overview of employee benefits, but it never really got too deep into professional liability.
And that makes sense because professional liability is a niche, right? I don't have numbers, but if I had to guess, less than 25% of property casualty professionals work in professional liability, right? It really is like Plus might have numbers on this, but it's a niche. So it makes sense that the curriculum doesn't go too deep into it. But yeah, if you do an internship, if you think that site might be interesting and you do an internship in that site, it'll answer your question as to whether you really want to go in that direction or you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say back to your question, I'd say the internships, I think I learned more on my first internship that I could have imagined. Like I think it's just so important to take notes, ask questions, network internally, network externally. And again, like I don't really think people tell you to do that.
Really?
I mean, like people, you could respond, like if they are responsive and what kind of time you have, but I think it's kind of up to you too to kind of have the initiative to reach out. Maybe sometimes it's not as scheduled. Again, for me, I'm in Indianapolis working for a company in Chicago virtually for most of the internships, so that might have been kind of a step two. But I think the internships, let's say 70%, I'd say kind of like classroom knowledge. I think the classroom knowledge helps if you're actually interested in risk management. And I think it kind of gives you the background of how to do the internship, kind of have that rough guideline before you kind of get into the role, have some working terminology, kind of some keyword understanding. And I think like insurance operations was a class I took, and just kind of seeing how it all ties together, so you kind of know what to look for, what questions to ask when you're going into, that internship. And I'd say, having that group of people, your age, your similar school, kind of going to similar classes. And then just with Butler, when you go farther down, junior, senior year, your classes will get smaller and more specialized. You'll mostly have class with only your major at some point, or maybe a couple other majors. So, you're seeing the same people and you're all kind of going through the same process at the same time. So I'd say that's, like 10%, I'd say value.
Fantastic. How long? So your advice to future RMI majors. Oh, and real quick. Okay, so I'm guessing that because most people don't start an RMI freshman year, I'm guessing that you really only have time for 2 internships at most, like 2 summers from the time you kind of like went to RMI, took a class or two, and then did an internship, and then again, and then did an internship again.
Yeah.
So right, so maybe 2 internships if you're lucky, uh, according to my math. Well,
Yeah, so I think that's something that we could possibly improve upon. I think I got a little lucky how I was able to have internships during the school year,
oh, awesome.
fall and spring, and I don't think that's a very norm. And personally, I found it that maybe the brokers were a little more willing than like the carriers to kind of do that.
So
Just kind
how
of
many hours were you putting in since it was during the semester? How many hours a
yeah,
week?
I'd say like 20 to 30. So
Uh,
I'd say like, I mean, Butler gives 2 internships for credit. So then you would
mhm.
take one less class. So I'd be working Monday, Wednesday,
Ah,
Friday, and then have, 4 classes on Tuesday and Thursday. So kind of break it out like that.
okay.
So that was helpful, definitely.
That's super cool. Super cool. Probably a little harder to pull off if one of the two isn't online. Well, while you were doing
Yeah.
it, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, both were online. So basically, like Zoom into work instead of or Zoom into school, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty cool. That is really cool. Really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I'll
Uh,
tell you, there would be days where, last year I'd wake up in the morning, I'd forget which computer to pick up. Am I working
because
today or am I
work gave
joining
you
virtual class?
because
Yeah.
work you could only work from the work computer
Yeah.
because this is insurance.
Yeah.
I love that story. I
It'd
I
be
love.
like, am I joining Zoom, for class today? Because COVID, we had some mostly at
Uh,
class online. And then I was just kind of like, what day is it? But yeah,
uh,
no,
so I'll tell you a quick story. I'm a Mac guy, and insurance is mostly Windows environment, right? So for many years, I traveled with 2 laptops because I couldn't stand like once I was done working for the day, I couldn't stand like playing around on the Windows work laptop. I brought my Mac to be able to play around after work. Finally, at Jacobson, we are a Windows shop, but we are a Windows shop, and where our systems are. One of them is web based, the other one is Outlook, and our messaging system is Skype. All
mhm.
three of them exist on Mac. So after like a year, I pulled out an old Mac I had, and I tested whether I could work from it. And when I realized that I could, uh, I went and bought a new Mac, and now I work from my Mac. And I very rarely open my work computer now. Uh, very few people can get away, industry can get away with this. Like it's a small company, they don't require me to be on the VPN, which is the one thing I can't do. Uh, so anyway, I'm so happy nowadays because I travel with just my Mac. Uh, so anyway, uh,
And the Superman cape.
I generally only wear the Superman cape for gamma events. Uh, but we'll see in the future. We'll see. I have definitely become a little more bold about what I do at events. Recently, I've been wearing my top hat and my red jacket, even to some official Jacobson events. The ones like I wouldn't do it at like PCI, but anyway. So how, going back to the job search, how long before you graduate do you recommend to start actually job searching? I'm guessing at the beginning of your senior year, or like what is the best time to
Yeah.
start actually applying for jobs?
So I think, a big thing is to kind of decide what your options are. With those past internships, if you did do the summers,
Mhm.
I'd say even if you really liked your first internship one summer, I'd even recommend going to a different company, learning new knowledge, trying something new, because even something that you don't like is still a valuable internship, because if you can limit down, like, insurance is so big. If you can limit down, no, I don't want to go into reinsurance, no, I don't want to go to carrier, and you're like looking at like a brokerage, and you decide like your line of business, like, I think there's so many different ways to do it. But I think kind of getting a wide taste or kind of a variety, and even, with an internship, like if you are placed in the casualty department, And then if you network, with the property producers or, cash or professional liability, producers, just like a few calls, you could, like, I think just having that flexibility and just being encouraged to kind of reach out and kind of make it like an informal rotational program, or like even for the company
I
standpoint.
love that idea. Informal rotational program. And by the way, real quick pause or real quick parenthesis, as the carrier guy, I'm gonna say, if you're interning at a carrier, same story. Go network with the underwriters in the other lines of business, and create an informal rotation program. I love it. Go ahead.
Because I think that's in a long run, I think that's really in that company's best interest too. Because if you're coming out of school and you accept your job on, let's say casualty, and then you realize like 2 years down the line, you're like, wow, I don't really like casualty. I wish I was doing property. Then you might move. You might move
Yeah,
companies.
absolutely.
You move kind of businesses. So if the company gives you that chance, early in your career to kind of get that exposure, then that's great for them for retention and just for you to kind of build your skill set and get more developed.
I agreed completely, 100%.
Yeah. So I'd say, after you decide, are you going to go back to a past internship? Once you kind of figure out that, and even at the internships, if you're at a broker, you're sending out submissions to underwriters. Talk to those underwriters, stay in contact with them. Maybe you want to be an underwriter at that company. I just think it's how many people can you get, in contact with, how big can you kind of build a presence, and just kind of like exposure wise. That's something I realized is I have only ran into a couple people who I was like, wow, this person's does not want to talk to me, or like they're not being very helpful. But I think that's speaking volumes, of the insurance industry. Like, LinkedIn, time for a call, that's really all I put in my subject line of the email, time for a call, question mark. And the amount of responses that you get back is, I think that speaks
And,
volumes.
and I want to say, like, it worked. I can quantify what you're giving a master class on how to network for RMI students. And by the way, RMI students, I recommend the book Never Eat Alone. But what I'm saying, it worked. Not only are you connected with me, but you've got 3,000 plus connections on LinkedIn, right? That is more than I would, in my experience, more than the majority of insurance professionals, period. Right? I've got 18,000, but I'm an exception to the rule. I'm like top 10 in the US for insurtech, for insurance, not insurtech people. But the average insurance professional might have 800 to 1,200. If I had to guess, if just based on what I've seen, if we were to put all insurance professionals that have a LinkedIn, there's some that don't, I never understand that, but that have a LinkedIn, and we were to choose the median one, I'm guessing that median person would be somewhere between 800 and 1,200 connections. So you're starting your career at like 3 times the number of connections of the average person that has been working in this industry for a while. That's amazing. So anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I mean, I just say it's getting in that habit, like that mindset. If I had maybe 4 internships, and I think, that's just keeping like that habit from, the first internship going to the second internship, kind of getting into that routine, with LinkedIn, with networking. I think networking is kind of like a lost art, with that. And even like the little things you wouldn't really think of, like the business insurance journals, people are moving around, just copy and paste that name, throw it into LinkedIn, add them, like those little things, it adds up.
When you add somebody on LinkedIn, don't make the mistake that Tony made at the beginning of his career, and always include a note. Okay, and that note could be as simple as, hey, my name is Darren, I'm an RMI student, I'm doing an internship in X place, your profile looked interesting, I'd love to add you to my network, or I'd love to pick your brain about your company, or whatever. Like just include a note, because if you don't, too many of those will be rejected. and you might end up like Tony on the bad boys list on LinkedIn, where you can no longer add people.
It's happened to me a couple times, especially during the job search there. But yeah, no, exactly what you're saying is, that's your time to make an introduction. Who are you? How can I help you? Why are you adding me? And, especially with that job search there, I think use of LinkedIn for me, like I said, there's several ways to go about it. I knew I wanted to go back to Chicago. And, I think that kind of, once you narrow down a city, a line of business, and then I think you also have to keep in mind is like, how small are you making your circle, and can you make it, a little bigger? Like at first I was dead set on wholesale, E&S. And I was like, I only want to go into excess and surplus. But then is Chicago professional liability, excess and surplus, is that small of an area to cover? Do you have to open it up to professional liability and just Chicago? So that's something that I had to adjust to.
That's a fantastic point. And okay, we're recording in 2021. We're recording this on Saturday, November 6th, 2021. And so we're kind of at the end of COVID, but we're still not entirely sure what the post-COVID era is going to look like. We have some ideas, right? So I think, and I'm pretty sure, that for insurance, the post-COVID era is going to be remote or largely remote. Now, if you call me for career advice today and you say, hey, Tony, I have an offer for a training program that is remote and a training program that requires me to move to X place, I will very likely say, if you can, I would move. I mean, I would choose the company I like best, but there are things for which in-person is better, and training is one of those. The training program is going to be much better in person. So if you can, go do it. So the reason I say that is because you said something super interesting that I hadn't thought of, which is that you will have to balance, at least at the beginning of your career, location and the lines of business or type of insurance that you're interested in. Okay, because you're right. E&S is a great example. E&S is heavy in Phoenix, Arizona, or to be more specific, Scottsdale, Arizona, Atlanta, Georgia, where I live, Richmond, Virginia. Those are the E&S cities. Chicago is an insurance city, like Hartford, Connecticut, like Des Moines, Iowa, like Columbus, Ohio. It is not, and like New York City, it is not an E&S hub. So yeah, if you have to weigh those two, eventually it won't matter, because once you're fully trained, and by that, once you've gone through a training program and you've got 3-4 years of underwriting experience in that line, and you've got your CPCU, I can pretty much guarantee that you'll be able to get a remote job and just live where you want to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I hadn't thought of that. Very, very interesting.
And I think to touch back on kind of that message, for me, adding someone on LinkedIn, I literally was just searching people in Chicago, trying to find, or they professional liability, and then just sending, hey, is your Chicago professional liability office hiring? And then, if you send out 20 of those, hopefully half of those reply.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's ballsy. That's gutsy. I love it. And you, did you have any negative replies? I'm assuming you had a lot of radio silence. Some, we don't have anything. A few, yes, we do. And did you have any, like, leave me alone, right? Any sort of negative replies?
No, I would just say it would just be like the no reply. And it's also like the point of like, when do you just move on, from your standpoint?
How many times do you follow up? Yeah.
Yeah, you're just playing a numbers game there. And I think, it's also once you start, that clock, once you start interviewing with one company, I think this is something that's kind of unique too in the job search of during COVID, is you have the flexibility to, you're not flying out to this city interviewing, you're at your house, you're at your apartment, you're on Zoom, you're on email, you're on phone calls, you have the time to kind of sit down have a couple calls back to back, put some time aside, week by week. And then I think it's just getting in that habit again of, setting up a call. And then something I noticed is what I find kind of interesting too, is like sometimes you're talking to, the overall manager, and then they're sending you back down, and then to talk to your hiring manager, or you're talking to the hiring manager, they're sending you up. You might start with one underwriter, they're sending you through 3 underwriters. And I think it's like, when are you talking to HR? When are you not talking to HR? And I just think it's kind of interesting of like, how to use your network, or kind of like the process. Some companies are texting you, some companies are emailing you.
Interesting that some are texting you. That we're doing that at Jacobson. My recruiters are texting, but I would have guessed that at most carriers, it's not a thing yet to text during the recruiting process.
I mean, when are you doing phone calls too? And then when, I accepted a job with only seeing one person, having one call face to face, and then I just phone calls outside of that. So, I think that's kind of interesting too.
Okay. I have a very important question that I don't want to forget. So a quick parenthesis. So since you're a Chicago guy, what's your favorite deep dish pizza? Are you a Giordano's guy, a Uno's guy, a Lumalnati, or another
Lumalnati's, Tony.
Lumalnati? Why Lumalnati?
I think it's pretty close to my house, and it was close to my high school downtown as well. So
okay.
All about convenience as well.
Are you the type that does deep dish once a year, or are you like me, where like if I'm in Chicago, I'm getting deep dish? Now, if I lived in Chicago, it'd probably be like a once a month thing. So how often are you okay with deep dish?
Yeah, I would prefer deep dish whenever I would get it. I used to do like Friday pizzas too, where I would, in my apartment last year, I would, make my own pizzas. Kind of over that phase now, but it's a good place. Good
okay,
place.
Awesome. Thank you. It's very important for those that end up in Chicago. I might forever work for Jacobson, and some portion of that might be the fact that they're Chicago based and I get to visit the home office and have deep dish. Anyway. So yeah, let's go back to the job search. So
with just as I was saying, of narrowing down, what you want. And I think sometimes with that is, sometimes knowing what you don't want. For me, I didn't really think I wanted a rotational program. I didn't want to go through property and casualty and professional. I already knew I liked professional. And just with my internships, I felt confident enough that I got enough exposure to property and casualty to know that I like professional.
So hold on, I'm a huge fan of rotation programs, and I went through one late in my career, or middle, like not at the beginning of my career. I had been working for like 6 years, and I had been a nationwide for 2 before I went through a rotation program, and it was not in underwriting, it was in finance, so that sucked. But I'm a big fan of rotation programs. So it sounds, and feel free to correct me, it sounds like you're not against rotation programs. You had figured out that you wanted professional lines. So for you, it makes sense to go straight into professional lines.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. And I think, on a note too of like the training programs too, I found it more so on the carrier side of they're putting you in that 1 year kind of class. And it's like, what happens when you get out of that year? Are you, and I think just kind of asking similar questions to companies, for the carriers, like, are you playing the authority game? Like, are you going through the training program to get authority? And then what is your authority? Are you going up, the ladder? Or is it, wow, we're putting up limits so high, like 25 million in limits that, nobody really has necessarily authority. We're having eyes on it. We're having 4 sets of eyes, or 4 eyes on every deal. So I think it just depends on, like I said, asking those similar questions to be able to kind of compare of what one company is saying to kind of the other company. And I think just seeing yourself, in that entry-level role and really understanding what, your expectations for that job is and what their expectations for you are as well.
Okay, this is very interesting. I had never thought of that. I did not go through an underwriting training program. So I never thought of that question. I kind of assumed that they looked very similar at the end. At the end, you get a book of business, and you start ahead of everybody else that didn't go through a training program. And so, but I agree with you. And one big question, for example, is geographically what happens. For example, CNA's program, I at least before the pandemic, was you move to Chicago for the program, but then after the program, we can send you anywhere we want to, right? So you definitely want to ask questions on that, and then I'm a former underwriter at two different companies. I underwrote for Nationwide Ag as a small commercial, and I underwrote a couple of years later, or 3 or 4 years later, at Liberty for middle market, and I did that for 2 years. And those were two very different situations when it comes to authority. So my authority at Nationwide Ag was, X, and anything above that you need authority, and it was pretty decent. And I had the ability to go 25% over or 25% under what the system said when it comes to pricing. But interestingly, because it's small commercial, small farm, the agents had binding authority. So basically, when I was looking at new business, I was looking at business that was already bound. And I was underwriting it afterwards, and whatever changes I wanted to make, I had to wait until renewal, right? And I think that we were able to get off of it with like a 90-day warning or whatever. But anyway, very different from at Liberty, where I was looking at the business before it was bound, and it's up to me whether to bind it or not. And I had much more authority, but the authority at Liberty was super complicated. It was an Excel file with like 60 tabs. And if it wasn't for my UA, who was amazing, Becky, love you forever. She's now happily retired. I would never have been able to keep track of that authority. But I guess what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way, like from my perspective, authority is, and we'll see how you feel in a couple of years once you've actually worked as an underwriter for a couple of years. In my opinion, authority is not that big of a deal. I mean, yeah, I don't want to be at a company where I'm going to have very, very limited authority. I'm going to have to ask for permission for everything. But at Liberty, on all the interesting accounts, I had to go to somebody else for authority because there was something that required that. But I didn't mind doing that because as long as I could make a good case for it, whoever I went to, whether it was my boss or his boss or the underwriting consultant for property or whoever I had to go to for authority, as long as I made a good case for it, generally I would get a yes. And
yeah, I think that's great. Is that perspective on authority? I think it's building confidence. Going into your manager's office, kind of pitching this. Who's the broker? How many accounts you have with them? Where is this risk? Do you have any risks kind of like this? And I think, I think authority is I think the concept is a positive thing overall of kind of having, but you're balancing that difference of perspectives, kind of gathering more information internally, but then you're also balancing that with the brokers. They need the response, they're moving quick. And I think it's just kind of using that time to as much time as you need, but then also keeping in mind that you're competing on time as well. If one broker gets a quote back from a different carrier before you send your quote, sometimes that's going to lose it for you.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and with the noted geographies, as you're saying, from a distribution standpoint, is I talked to some companies that were assigning based on like a state. Hey, you'll get this state and this state upon your completion of this training, and then some of them are by territory. Hey, we do West Central, and then there's an East team, and I think just kind of having as broad as possible exposure as possible as early as early on as you can. I think that is very important as well.
And I want to add to that you're probably, we'll see how the post-COVID world looks like, but you're probably going to either live, or more likely you're going to go visit that territory fairly often, depending on the line of business, depending on the company's theory on this, philosophy on this. In my experience, at Nationwide, I was supposed to visit my territory once a year, so it wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't. I had Maryland and Delaware. With Liberty would have loved for me to live in my territory, but they were okay with me visiting my territory once a month. My territory, I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, a wonderful city. My territory was Mississippi. I don't want to live in Mississippi for many reasons, and I had to go visit Mississippi once a month. If I had two offers, or if I were looking at two training programs, and one of them is like, hey, you're gonna be the Mississippi underwriter when you graduate, and the other one is saying you're gonna be the New York City underwriter when you graduate, I want to be strongly biased toward. No, it's not biased. I have a strong preference for the program that puts me in New York City afterwards.
Yeah,
you get it right. Like so yes. Which territory you're gonna have is going to, and not only for which territory it's fun to live in or to visit, but also part of my problem with the Mississippi territory is it was almost entirely a renewal territory. The great majority, there's only so much middle market business in Mississippi. So when it came in, even stuff that was coming in as new business, we had seen before. It was very rare that we would get an account submitted that we had never seen. So that was a little bit boring. And the experience that I got would have been much better if I had had a territory like Atlanta or like Chicago, right? A territory with a lot of activity.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you're kind of saying is I think asking as many questions as you can, on both sides, from the interviewee and the interviewer, perspective. I think it's your job to underwrite, the company that you're potentially going to go work with. What, like, do you see yourself in that role that they're describing to you? And I think it's accountability on both sides. Hey, have you said, I'm starting and doing something like this, and I started and it's nothing like you said. I just think it's kind of accountability from that. And I just think just overall, yeah, it's a stressful situation to go through, these interviews, but it's good stress to have, some options and some choices. And I think that's kind of one of the benefits of the risk management major and these past internships is that you are not limited to one company or two companies, cast a wide net. But I think it's also balancing like being your own advocate and you have to be a little selfish for you. It's picking a high school, it's picking a college, it's picking, your first company. It's all very big steps. But then I think you also have to keep in mind that, the person on the other end of this video call or this phone call, they could be your new coworker too. So I think just kind of seeing that forward thinking, and you have to be respectful with their timelines and your timeline.
Burn no bridges.
Yeah, of course.
Be respectful of the time, absolutely. And no, you're right. Like this interview is a window into that company. Keep an eye on everything, right? And if we're back in the world where, if you're watching this and we're back in the world where they're willing to fly you in to physically, face-to-face interview, not just on Zoom, take a look at everything that you can, right? Get a feel for, do the people seem happy? Talk to whoever they let you talk to, and see if you can get a real feel for what it's like to work in that department, in that company, in that building.
Yeah, I'd say overall, it's a valuable experience to, again, build your network. Because, if I was interviewing with some brokers, I'm going to the carrier side. Now these could be, my brokers. I already have the connection with some of them. So I think just playing like the long game and just kind of, as many people as you talk to, write it down, just take notes, figure out what's going on.
On paper, how old-fashioned of you.
Oh, I love it. You see my paper calendar behind me.
No, I agree with everything you're saying. 100% agree with everything you're saying. I would add, I get a lot of, so I want to play the old man here for a second, since I'm breathing down on 40 very quickly here. When I graduated college and I was trying to choose my first job, I remember very naturally thinking that I'm going to be with this company forever, right? So very, very better choose wisely. And now that I've been in working for I don't know, 15 years, my God, something like that. Yeah, I think 15 years exactly. I've realized that no, the reality is like chances are you're not going to be with this company forever. So the advice that I give RMI majors when they call me and they're like stressed about how to choose between multiple offers, don't worry too much. I mean, yes, put the time into it, make a good decision, but don't worry too much about it, because ultimately, if you go to X company and you love it, if you go to X company and you hate it, 2-3 years later, finish your CPCU and make a move at like a 30 or 40% raise. Or if you go to Y company and you love it, 2 to 3 years later, chances are you're now worth a lot more in the market than you're getting paid. You might have to leave and come back. So don't worry too much about the first one. But yes, I agree with everything you said when it comes to how to underwrite this decision.
Yeah, and I think as you're saying, what are you looking for in that first job? I think it's the team. What team are you joining? How long have they been together? Have they moved from this company to this company to this company together? How, like, I mean, you can get too into it and get very deep into LinkedIn, and especially now, a lot of movement going on. But
this is a truism for like people that have worked for a long time know this. But for kids coming in out of college, I think that this is worth saying. People don't quit companies; they quit bosses and teams. Your team and your direct manager will have a much bigger influence in your day-to-day happiness than the company itself. I would almost rather go to a great team at a mediocre company than a mediocre team at a great company.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you have to make the decision. Even if you have these offers in front of you, you have to make a decision. It has to be a decision you're going to be confident in. A company you're excited to join, a position that you're happy to see yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like you can get as much advice as you want, from outside perspectives, people at the company, people at your internships, like in your network. But you have to make your choice, and at the end of the day, it's up to you.
And once, talk to all the advisors, and I'm happy to help. Chat with Tony.com. I'm happy to be one of your advisors, one of your mentors. But yeah, ultimately the decision is yours, and don't let anybody make it for you, including your parents, if they happen to be from the industry. I chatted yesterday with a guy whose dad and grandfather both were brokers for Aon. So you can guess what he was pressured when he was graduating, and he didn't go in that direction. Now he's years later. But anyway, that's why I said it. Like, don't let anybody make a decision for you. Things have changed. Make the decision that makes sense for you today. I would also add. I was gonna add, and I lost my train of thought. Okay, yeah, no. Make your own decision. Oh, I know what I was gonna add. Michael Moore at I think he goes by Mike Moore at Nationwide, many years ago told me that he worked for Allied before Allied was acquired, and at Allied he bled Allied blue and he wore the Allied shirt, so to speak, and then they got bought by Nationwide. Or no, I think it was Allied green before they got bought by Nationwide. And when they got bought by Nationwide, a lot of people were upset. A lot of longtime Allied people were upset. And they either left or even stayed reluctantly, and they weren't a big fan of Nationwide. And Mike's decision and advice to me going forward was, if you change companies, or if your company gets acquired, the smart thing to do is to go from bleeding Allied green to bleeding Nationwide blue. And so my advice to everybody is, whatever company you choose, I love it. I've got all sorts of insurance swag. My girlfriend's the broker side. She's not a broker, but she's in the broker side. We get all sorts of insurance crap, and I love it. She gives it all to me. She doesn't like it.
So much swag.
Insurance swag, yeah. So she calls it carrier crap. I love this stuff. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, whichever company you choose, show up. Put on the jersey. So, that's what my mom says. Metaphorically, put on the jersey, and make it clear to everybody that you if you chose CNA, you bleed CNA red, at least while you're there, right? And make it clear to everybody, like, I'm here to learn all I can. I'm here to do all I can for the company. And parenthesis, I'm not promising lifetime here, but uh, what I'm saying is, don't go in and like tell anybody that your plan is to get 2 years of experience and then move on.
Yeah, Tony,
While
I think
you're there, be the best employee for that company that you can be.
yeah, exactly what you're saying. And I think that's something I had to wrap my head around too, is the aspect of loyalty, because with these internships, you're there like 6 months, you're switching, and it's like, okay, like you had a few companies and you just kind of keep switching, but that's not the real world. You're insulated from internship.
So it's complicated, and it'll take you a long time to figure out. But there is no such thing as corporate loyalty. There is no such thing as lifetime employment. Okay, and I wish that when we hired people, we were more honest about that. Okay, we're not promising you lifetime employment. The employment agreement of the 21st century is a firm month's work effort for a firm month's wage. And also from the employer's perspective, I also give you access to other tools for you to develop yourself. But it's your job to manage your own career, and it's your job to make sure that if we ever don't need you anymore, or if we ever go out of business or get acquired or whatever, it's your job to make sure that you have taken advantage of the tools that we gave you: tuition reimbursement, et cetera, internal training, et cetera, to make sure that you have a good parachute on your back. In my opinion, the best parachute in the industry is the CPCU. Now, in professional lines, it might be a plus designation. I don't know. Probably RPLU would be the one. It might be RPLU, right? So make sure that you bleed for the company, but make sure that you are also building your own parachute in case someday they no longer need you. So how loyal should you be to the company? You should work hard, and you should market their products or whatever your job is. But yeah, just be mindful of the fact that you might not be there forever.
Yeah. Well, just wanted to thank you, Tony, for having me on, and thanking everyone at Insurance Nerds for just being that resource. I remember we were down in Dallas a couple of years ago, and I recorded one of your
yes. So that session is called The First 5 Years, and it is on YouTube. It's really, this story is really funny. So basically, I walk in to give this session, and I need somebody to record it. And did I ask for a volunteer?
Where's the freshman?
What's that?
You were like, where's the freshman?
So awesome. And Darren raises his hand. I hand him my phone with probably a gimbal. I think it was a gimbal because it's a pretty good recording. And basically he got to hold it for an hour while I gave my first 5 years presentation. And of course, I immediately forgot who actually held the camera. So later on, when we connected, he mentioned that he had. So I sent him a free copy of my book, or one of our books. I can't remember which one. So that session is on LinkedIn. It has like 700 views. If you search for The First 5 Years, you'll find it. It's my best advice for the first 5 years of your insurance career. Darren, thank you so much. Oh, the big announcement. So Darren can no longer continue to do the National Alliance podcast because he's no longer a student, and it's supposed to be a student-run podcast. So starting sometime in November, December, I don't know, he is coming on to Insurance Nerds as a podcast host. And what is your podcast name, and what is it about?
Yeah, well, I'm aiming it a day in the life. You'll specify, which insurance professional you're having on. It'd be like, just kind of like their career path. And I think something that really was hard for me coming, into the insurance industry is kind of understanding what, that job actually is. What do you do? And, I think just kind of paving that way, kind of leaving that trail of breadcrumbs for others to just kind of see, like kind of a behind the scenes, behind the curtain, kind of into that industry, that specialty, that distribution, link in the chain wise. So that's what I'm really passionate about and really excited to keep putting out content on.
Super exciting for both of us. So how do you subscribe to Darren's podcast? Well, at the beginning, the hardest part of a podcast is building an audience, a listenership. Since we already have a built-in listenership of insurance professionals that listen to Profiles in Risk, basically you subscribe to Profiles in Risk, and whenever Darren produces an episode of A Day in the Life, and I don't know how often that will be, it'll come out on the same feed as Profiles in Risk. Now, someday we might separate that if it gets really big, but for now, easy, just profilesinrisk.com. You can find the link to subscribe to the Profiles in Risk podcast, and feel free to just ignore it when it's not. If you don't care about profiles, you just want to hear his, feel free to ignore it when it's mine or somebody else's. No worries. I don't get mad. So Darren, thank you for joining me today. It's been really awesome. I'm so excited to have you with the Insurance Nerds team, and looking forward to see what you produce, and looking forward to continue the conversation over time.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy to join the team. Thank you very much for the opportunity.